by me, so we might get started. I'm not quite sure how many people we have at the moment, but certainly my screen is full. Okay. So welcome everybody to all the participants in our Australian Association for Environmental Education Learning Circle. I'm very pleased to be sharing this session with you today, and it's entitled Exploring Intersections, Nature Play and Sustainability in the Early Years. I'd like to also acknowledge our Indigenous elders past and present on whose land we meet. So thank you everybody for being here, and I know that we're going to have a very interesting session and discussion this afternoon. Can I just remind everybody to please make sure that your microphone is muted so that we don't have any background noise. That causes problems for everybody. So just the panelists, facilitators, if you could have your microphones unmuted, but for everybody else to be muted. Can I also mention that we have the group chat site on the right-hand side of your screen, and Jennifer Pearson, who's the president of A Squared E Squared, will be monitoring that chat site, and that's where you can post some questions. And we'll be dealing with some questions later in the program. So the program I did email out today to everybody, and essentially what we'll be doing is having the panelists speak for 6 to 8 minutes each on a particular topic related to exploring the intersections of nature play and sustainability in the early years. Then after each facilitator in the panel has had a chance to speak, then we'll have sort of 20 minutes, I hope, maybe 30 minutes for responding to some of the questions that have been posted on the group chat. I'd also like to let you know that this is being recorded and it will be available post this learning circle from the Australian Association for Environmental Education website. It will only be available for a limited period for 1 week. Typically these recordings are only available to members of the association, but because we've had many people, initially there were about 500 people that wanted to join this learning circle. So we've decided to make the recording available for a week to both members and non-members of the association. I'd just like to go around the group now and introduce the facilitating panel members. Just before I do, can I just have a thumbs up from people that I can see? You're hearing okay? Is there any problems anybody's got at the minute? No? Okay, looks like we're all going okay. Good. This is, we had to restrict this to 100 people because Zoom can only deal with up to 100 people. There's no way we could do a Zoom session with 500, and we will be having conversations about what we do next after this. All right. So just to go around the group, I've probably forgotten to say my own name in this. So I'm Sue Elliott, and I'll be convening this session, and I'm located at the University of New England in Armidale in northern New South Wales. I'd also like to introduce the other panel members. So we have Jennifer Pearson. Jennifer, would you like to wave? Jennifer is the president of the Australian Association for Environmental Education, and I'll ask her to speak in a minute. And then if we go through the various members of our group today, Karen Anderson. Karen is from Victoria. She's a teacher at Balnarring Kindergarten, and she's currently convener of the Early Childhood Outdoor Learning Network in Victoria. So if you are based in Victoria, Karen's the person to get in touch with, and she has a lot of expertise, having worked doing beach kinders for quite some time now and working with local Indigenous people. Also, Fran Hughes. Fran, would you like to giveaway. Fran will be speaking as second person. And Fran is convener of the New South Wales network, which is the Early Childhood Outdoor Learning Network. And, sorry, I beg your pardon, the New South Wales Early Years Nature Connections. And Fran will be talking about pedagogical approaches to education for sustainability. I'd also like to introduce Jenny Dudgeon and Ruth Whelan. Where are you? Wave, Jenny and Ruth. Okay. So they're based in Tasmania, and they'll be talking about community responses to a nature play sustainability and outdoor classroom immersion program for early years, foundation to grade 2 and student perspectives. And we also have co-located with them in Tasmania, Chris Haas. Chris, wave, thanks Chris. You're going to be talking about your master's research study about kindergarten children's introduction to sustainability through transformative experiential nature play, followed by an example of children's connection to place, raising student voice and active citizenship. And last but not least, we have Michael Voss. Michael, could you give a wave? Thanks, Michael. So Michael is going to be talking about bush kinder pedagogy, kindergarten to grade 4, balancing growing school and environmental stewardship. And Michael is a kindergarten teacher at the Eastside Lutheran College in Hobart. So we have a wealth of expertise across this group this afternoon for the Learning Circle. And please remember to post your questions on the group chat if you'd like to. I'd just like to hand over to Jennifer Pearson briefly to say something on behalf of the Australian Association for Environmental Education. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, Sue. Just a warm welcome to everybody. Thanks for showing your interest in this webinar. And as Sue said, we've decided we'll make it available for a week. So let all your non-members know that they have access to it. I'd also like to acknowledge Sue and Jenny Dudgeon. They're on the executive with me, and we're just fashioning a quiet revolt so that we can make sure that early childhood comes up on the agenda for the work that we do at a national level. So I thank them most sincerely for all their efforts in this area, and I hope you enjoy the session. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Okay, so the intention was that I'll start the panel process and talk a little bit about an overview of nature play in Australia and internationally, and offer some questions for provocations to keep in mind. So I'm not sure where people are at around this group in terms of nature play or bush kinder, whatever you want to call it. There's quite a few names bandied around, but there are many different nature play contexts that people are using in Australia, and we're following on very much from the work that's happening internationally, where there's a strong interest in nature play. We're in the middle of a global nature play movement, which has arisen out of the original forest schools and preschools in Scandinavia that started in the 1950s, then moved to the UK about 20 years ago. And now if you have an opportunity to travel overseas, you will find all sorts of nature play forest preschool programs in many countries around the world, such as Japan, Canada, New Zealand, Korea. So, and there are many ways of doing these particular programs with young children in the early years. It might be using a beach space, it might be a forest, it might be remnant vegetation. I've even seen a forest preschool program in an old logging coop in Denmark. So there's no one right place in which you would conduct a nature play program. I think one of the points I want to make is that often when we think about nature play programs, we think about the physical context, and certainly nature play programs, the context is often defined by the diverse sensory elements that are available, whether it's the dirt and the flowers and the water and the hills and landscape, It also can be defined by the loose materials that are available for children to play with. So often when you're looking for a nature play site, you want there to be some rocks, some logs, some twigs and bark and leaves, things that children can manipulate and develop into play scenarios. You're also looking for, in the physical space, some opportunities for risk and challenge. And that might be simply balancing on a log, it might be climbing a tree, it might be some stepping stones. So that's a physical element that's often noted in the different types of spaces that people use. There's also an element in the physical environment of novelty and change, because you are going out the gate beyond the fence to a different sort of space for children. And it's also a space where you're likely to observe changes over time, whether that's changes in the vegetation, changes in the landscape itself, different things that happen in public spaces that we visit that may not be happening in the centre space where you would typically work, or the school space if you're in a school. There's also another aspect of the context might be the local cultural and geographical relevance. There might be particular indigenous meanings in the spaces that you go to, or there might be particular historical landmarks. And it depends on the land use as to what particular elements might be there. So they're the sorts of physical things that come to mind. But having been involved in these nature play programs now for a number of years, since about 2011, when the first program was established by Doug Farger at Westgarth Kindergarten in Melbourne, there seem to be some other things that are appearing that build up this complete picture of what some of these nature play programs are about. So some things to consider are that it's about sustained and repeated engagement with natural settings. And when I say sustained and repeated, if you're following a Scandinavian model, that's all day, every day. But in Australia, more typically what's happening is people are going out for half a day or a day once a week. There are some programs that will go out for less time than that. There are some programs that do it more frequently. And there are some nature schools developing now where most of their program is outdoors. So there's a range of possibilities there to play with. The other thing to consider is that we're talking about child-led, play-based learning approaches. This is not about going outside, as some teachers might think, and ticking off a list of vegetation, which has happened in some situations overseas, ticking a list of plants and animals that you can find. We're actually transferring our early childhood play-based approaches into a very different context in nature. That children are viewed as capable and competent learners, problem solvers and risk takers. And this is something, if I'm talking to people about establishing programs, to understand that if you have an image of children which is one based on deficit and comes out of developmental understandings, then it's possible that you're not going to see the potential for children in these sorts of different outdoor spaces. But if you have an image that children can take risks, they can solve problems, and they're doing that all the time in these different types of natural settings, then I think that creates a good pedagogical understanding that you can take into the work in that space. The other thing that comes through in a number of the services that I've worked with is around communities of caring children, educators and families. That there's a strong ethic of caring for our community, for our children, for educators and families that I've observed in the many nature play programs that I've been to. And it might be something as simple as when you walk along a track, that you care by holding a branch back so it doesn't flick onto the face of the next person. Or it might be families caring about the space by getting involved in revegetation projects or picking up litter and those sorts of things. So that ethic of caring seems to come through very strongly in nature play programs. Another aspect that I'm quite interested in, given my focus on sustainability and global sustainability, is about ensuring that there are sustainable practices in our nature play programs. It's not enough to simply identify plants and animals, or to you know, to build with cubbies and think, well, okay, we're in nature and therefore we've done sustainability. There's more to it than that, and it's about engaging in pedagogies with children that actually question some of the ways of being that we have in natural environments. Are we working in ways in these natural environments that's going to support children having an understanding of sustainability, and how can we be in these environments that promotes these environments being sustained? So sometimes I've seen things like drawing on trees or on plants. I've seen branches broken, I've seen fruit picked, not necessarily in Australia but overseas, and to me there's not an ethic of caring, and there's certainly not a critical pedagogy around sustainability when these practices are engaged in the natural spaces that we use for nature play programs. There's also the Indigenous meanings and worldviews, and I won't say much about this because I know Karen on our panel today is an expert in this area, but certainly there are opportunities that many nature play programs are using to engage with local Indigenous elders to understand the Indigenous meanings of the particular spaces that they're engaging in. Another point I'd also make is around the theoretical underpinnings, and it was interesting to me at a recent master's thesis presentation that I went to, that the presenter made strong connections between critical reflection and people that were engaged in nature play programs. And I'm not sure if you're aware that critical reflection is certainly something that underpins early years practice, and it's well stated in our national quality standards and early years learning framework, and it would also be part of school practice, teaching practice as well. But critical reflection needs to happen, and it seems to happen more often based on this master's research. It seems to happen more often if people are engaged in nature play programs. So it seems to be that perhaps maybe I'm making too much of an assumption, but it seems to be that educators that are willing to step out the gate beyond the fence, really push the paradigms of what early years programs are about for young children, and to recognise children as capable in these very different sorts of spaces, are people that actively engage in critical reflection about their curriculum, about the pedagogy, and about the different contexts where learning is possible for young children. So I find that quite an interesting area that probably needs some further research. So on that basis, critical theory and critical reflection, I think, need to underpin what we're doing in our nature play programs. The other two theoretical areas that come to mind are the post-humanist area, which some people may have heard of. It's only recently come into the early childhood sphere over the last decade, probably, in particularly recent years. And that understanding that we need to break down the binary, the human nature binary that seems to persist and has led to many of the environmental issues that we're dealing with today. So that rather than seeing nature as a resource to be used by humans, and humans are, you know, their needs are most important, a post-humanist perspective suggests that we need to work together in more responsive ethical relationships, and that we need to take much more care in how we relate to the plants and animals and the physical environment that we are part of. that we are not separate, that we share common worlds is the term. And we can do this particularly well in the nature play spaces that we're using for nature play programs. There are some other theoretical perspectives that could be explored, but I think probably critical theory informing critical reflection about different ways of doing things, and post-humanism breaking down that human nature binary are probably enough for here. But there is literature that's available if people want to take that further. So all of these things can inform how we develop critical eco-pedagogies in our nature play spaces. So I really encourage people to go beyond things such as, you know, questioning what plant is that, what animal is that, or how high can you climb. They're the sorts of challenges that we might present to children in our nature play spaces. But really we need to go further than that, thinking about Indigenous meanings, thinking about global sustainability, thinking about how we are impacting on the environments that we are using. Because certainly the landscapes in Australia that we utilise for different nature play programs are very much impacted by children, by educators and by families. And how can we do that in ways that are mindful of the issues that we may be creating in those spaces? Jennifer, did you want to say something? Have I?
No, so Sue, I'm just keeping an eye on the time for you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. That was the last thing I actually wanted to say. So, so I hope that gives a broad introduction. And I'll now hand over to our next panel speaker, which is Karen Anderson. Karen, would you like to now take the floor or the Zoom session and share what you'd like to say today? Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. If you hear a dog bark, don't get a shock. He's at my feet and he's a guide dog and he thinks he's a guard dog. So apologise beforehand. So I teach at Balnarring Preschool on the Mornington Peninsula in Victoria. And I would just first of all like to acknowledge the Balnarring people where we learn. And in particular, I'd like to acknowledge Elder Carolyn Briggs, who on the weekend was awarded an AO. So very exciting that we're working with her and she's being recognised for all the work she's doing with her communities. So I'll start off with the Early Childhood Outdoor Learning Network first. So that is a network that's based in Victoria. We have a committee of 8 people who are spread around maybe a 90 kilometre radius, and we all have different skills, and 4 of us at the moment are practicing doing nature programs, and the other members have got very valuable skills that we're all very happy to have. So the idea of the Nature Network is that we're supporting practitioners to develop nature programs, and we're focusing very much on the uniqueness of those programs. So there's not a one size fits all, but the programs are developed according to the teachers and community and spaces that they can access. So we're really, really strong in people following their own thoughts on how those programs will develop. We have an email distribution list of 525 people, which is very exciting, mostly Victoria, but also across Australia, and even some overseas people are on that distribution list. We're all volunteers, so we're working and then doing this in our spare time, whenever that might be. We have a website, so if you haven't seen our website, please go and have a look. On that website, there's some examples of services that are running different programs. There is some links to different references, and there's a map on there that shows the distribution of nature programs. A lot of those are in Victoria, but if any of you on this call today are running a nature program and want to be put on that map, please contact us and that will happen. And that's to show centres where other programs have run, but also for families, if they're interested in finding preschools and childcare centres that are running nature programs, they can look on that map. We've held 4 conferences, and this year we had a 2-day conference, which was really exciting with our partnership with the Royal Botanical Gardens in Melbourne. We have a gathering each term in a different site so people can see how different all the sites are and the challenges and successes that come depending on which sites you may use. We were invited to contribute to an article from the Journal of Outdoor Environmental Education, which was called No Tools, No Toys, No Art Supplies, The Rise and Rise of Nature Kindergartens in Victoria. That was a real honour for us to be offered to contribute to that publication. We've partnered with the kids in, thank you. Oh, good, I got that sorted. Well done, Sue. We've partnered with the Kids in Nature Network and the Department of Health and Recreation to run a State of Nature Play survey in Victoria, which the results of that are on the Kids in Nature Network website. We've done delegations to the Treasurer's Office and the Department of Education seeking support for all services to be able to provide a nature program within their spaces. We've done several conference presentations as a team. And one of the most exciting things that we've done last year is we developed a training package. So we wanted to show teachers and educators they didn't actually need an extra qualification to be able to run these programs, but how could we support them and give them the confidence to know that they could do that. So I think Michael, who's also on the call tonight, was in that our first one last year, and it's a 3-day program. The first day is just the nuts and bolts and how it fits in with all our frameworks and regulations, and then the participants have an option to do a site visit so they can see the programs in action, and then we come back and reflect and work out, well, how's it going to look for you in your service. So that's been really, really exciting, but even more exciting, that's led to us being put on the school readiness menu in Victoria, which is something that's been rolled out this year for kindergartens to apply for extra funding according to the qualifications and work experience of their community. And each centre gets money, and then they have to spend that money on programs that have been approved by the Department of Education. And our training package was approved to do that, which we were very, very excited about. So we've had 32 services want to do our training package this year, which, as you can imagine, when we're all volunteering, is quite a nightmare for us to work out how we're going to roll that out, but we're getting there. So, and then every year that's got to roll out to more services. So this year it's like just part of Victoria. Next year it's like half of Victoria, and then the year after it's the whole of Victoria. So we've opened a can of worms, but the most exciting thing is that the government have said nature programs are really great for children's outcomes. So go for it, everybody. It's a really great thing to be involved in. Is that enough about the network, Sue?
Thanks, Karen.
Okay.
That's excellent. There's lots of things happening in Victoria. Your website's now being shared on the chat. Thanks, Tanya, for putting that in there.
Thank you. Now back to my personal, in my preschool. So I've been at Balnarring for 35 years. I run one 4-year-old group, which is 15 hours a week, and 5 hours a week we go out to the beach in the bush. We start at the beginning of the year and we end at the end of the year. So we go every week, and it's amazing, and lots of things have happened. And the more time I've spent in that space, so I'm in my 8th or 9th year of running that program, the learning for myself and for what I want for the children develops and deepens every year. So I'm not going to talk about the Beach in the Bush program, except to say that when we started that program, it was like there was something missing, and we decided that what was missing was First Peoples perspectives. We weren't using that in probably any of our program, and if we were, it wasn't very authentic. So we've embarked on a really strong commitment for reconciliation, where we're embedding First Peoples perspectives every day in our program on a very authentic basis. And anytime you come into our kindergarten, you will see an aspect of First Peoples perspective somewhere. And of course, connecting with the land is really important to them. So that just strengthens that program for us, and our children's connection to the land is strengthened because of our connection to the Indigenous cultures, stories, language, songs and dance. So through that strong commitment, our committee allocates funds every year to Indigenous learnings for the staff as well as for the children. We've developed a collaborative project with the local schools and the Early Learning Centre. There was 3 services to start with, then there was 5, and then there was 6, and now we've had another service want to come and join in. And that involves the teachers from those services meeting once a month, and developing a program together. So the program might involve everyone coming together and learning with Indigenous people through dance, song, story, language, music. And we've done some really big projects. So we've built, Bunjil is a creative spirit of the Balnarring people, and he asks you to protect the children and the land. So how perfect is that for nature programs. So we've built a great big bundle nest down in a park near our beach, and the children regularly revisit that space. And we've also, I'll come back to it in a minute. So the Bundle Nest project is something that's been going for 5 years now. It's won a national award for innovative pedagogy and practice with the Hester Fund. And it's also led me to be involved in lots of different areas that I never thought I would be involved in. So I'm now part of the World Forum Foundation Global Leaders for Children program, and I've presented as a non-Indigenous person in Indigenous spaces at the World Forum in New Zealand and Hong Kong. Never ever thought that would be something that would come my way. And now I'm also part of the World Forum Indigenous Peoples Action Group, and we've created a document of understandings and principles that is going to be distributed for people to use across the world, if guiding them on how to include Indigenous perspectives into their program. So that all of that has led to really strong connections with our local elder, which I'm really, really privileged to have. It's hard to have access to elders, and we've chipped away at it, and we've worked really hard to develop a relation with Carolyn Briggs. And through that relationship, she has given us her creation stories and asked the children to illustrate them. And we've just published our first book. So I'm just going to show you that. Can you see it all right?
Yep. Thanks, Karen.
It's Bundle Creation Story, and at the moment it's available through the kindergarten. So if you're interested in purchasing it, you can. I'm just going to show you one of the pages. So the idea was that the teachers wouldn't lead this, the children would lead this, and it would be very much their voices. So here's just an example of how they've illustrated the story. And then along the bottom is the children's journey out on Balnarring country.
Karen, can I just explain, it might not be visible to people, that you've used ephemeral art with natural materials to create those images, and they're the children's ephemeral artworks that have been used to create the photographs for the story.
Thank you. And when we read the story to the children, there was no illustrations, and I was worried the children wouldn't understand the story because it's quite abstract. And I said that to Carolyn Briggs, and she said, Karen, they get it because of their connection to the land. So that's what's really important for us, is our connection to the land is giving the children much greater understanding about the world than they would have had if it was just a nice thing to do out in nature play. And also the other thing that's happened in our community is that Carolyn said, your community is embracing our culture. I think you should run a festival for them. And I said, don't be ridiculous. And she said, you can do it. So we opened up to the community to come and form a festival committee, and we've now run 2 festivals. And it's a whole day of entertainment, workshops, cultural workshops and activities. And we've just been, the Reconciliation Victoria Awards happened last week, and we received a highly commended award as part of the work that they've been doing. So from little things, big things grow. We've done lots and lots of things, and it started because we went out and did a nature program. Is that enough?
Okay, thanks, Karen. That's absolutely wonderful, and I'd highly recommend that publication that Karen's put together as a book to be using with young children that tells Indigenous story and uses children's artwork to illustrate. And do get in touch with Karen through the ECOLN website, and look out for the annual conference, which is in Nature Play Week in April each year. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Fran, are you ready to unmute and join?
I'm ready to
unmute. Fran Hughes from New South Wales. Thanks, Fran.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks, everybody, and welcome to everybody. I've got a couple of hats on tonight. The first thing that I'd just like to talk about is in New South Wales, we've started a similar type of organisation that Karen's been running for a long time, and her colleagues. We're kind of taking baby steps with ours. We're nowhere near as far as Karen's gone, but in New South Wales, it's called the New South Wales Early Years Nature Connections. And we have a Facebook site, and we have a website that's pretty much under construction, but hopefully we'll get that soon. And we're looking to become an incorporated association with volunteers, the same as the ECOLN organisation in Victoria. So have a look at the Facebook site. We have gatherings also every term, and our next one is on the 6th of July. If anybody is near Sydney, it's in Bulli, which is south of Sydney, near Wollongong. So it's at KU, one of the kindergarten union services in New South Wales, KU Bulli. So we'll be meeting there. So there's an invitation on the Facebook, so also have a look at that. Another kind of hat that I have on is I'm the coordinator of an early childhood degree at TAFE New South Wales. And from TAFE, we also run a course called the Early Years Bush Connections course. And we run that probably 2 or 3 times a year in Sydney. It runs over 3 days, and it's usually very successful. But we're just kind of working out whether we do it over a weekend or 3 weekends. Again, it just depends on how we run that. That won a Green Gun Award for sustainability. So it's a good thing, coming back to the sustainability part of Nature Play, that Nature Connections courses do have that sustainability focus as well as being in nature as well. What I will have a chance to talk to you about is some of the data and some of the findings that I've been investigating in a PhD that I'm writing at the moment. And the PhD is about the connection between nature and sustainability when educators take children into bush, beach, paddock, wherever. So I'm just going to focus on one of the kind of the areas of findings that came out from the study, and it's in terms of sustainability and the pedagogies that the educators in the 2 services that I did my research in. And basically, they focus predominantly on environmental sustainability, but over the period of the study, a number of the participants were starting to really look at activism as well. So through environmental sustainability, but looking at activism as well. They found that being in nature allowed them to be very intentional and quite purposeful around taking that teachable moment, taking that moment when they could talk about what was in nature. And they found that their relationships with nature influenced their pedagogy. So I'd just like to sort of point out that not everybody has positive relationships with nature. Some people are a bit scared about bits and parts of nature, and some people who haven't grown up in Australia with Australian natural things sometimes find that a bit scary in some ways. And it was interesting, a couple of years ago, Sue and I were in Canada, and they were saying, oh, there's terribly scary things in Australia. There's snakes and spiders. And we said, no, but you've got cougars when you take your children out into nature. So it's all around, I guess, developing a relationship with nature, and that then influences how you interact with nature. Also, the educators found that they were very responsive to the places they were in. And if they found a strong connection with that place, which is where they visited over numerous times, they felt that they were really responding in a place responsive pedagogy. So they cared. As Sue was talking about caring, that ethic of caring about a place, and that really developed their sense of sustainability about caring for that place, and they wanted that place to be cared for. Whilst doing that, they were aware of the impact that they and the children were having on the spaces that they were in, the places that they were in. Visiting those places on a regular basis, they were very aware about the impact they were having walking on the same space, walking on rocks that might have had moss on them, climbing on things and disrupting what was happening with the ecological life underneath them. So that was part of their pedagogy. They became very aware of that. Initially, it was about getting children out of the centre and into nature, and isn't that wonderful? But over the period of the study, they became very aware of what was happening to that specific place, and that really reflected their pedagogy in that place around sustainability and their relationship with that place. Some of the educators gained some very specific local knowledge about that place that they were in and the flora and the fauna in that place, and they were using the scientific names of those plants and animals that they found there, and they felt that that was a very important part of their pedagogy and being sustainable about that. And so through that, they did become co-learners with the children, because they didn't know the names, they didn't know the local names, they didn't know the indigenous names for plants, they didn't know the scientific and Latin names. So they became quite knowledgeable about that, and they felt that that was very important for them in one of the settings. And as Sue said, the educators from both of the settings found that they were able to critically reflect a lot more easily and deeply when they were in the bush, and also when they returned to their services. So they felt that that was part of their pedagogies around sustainability, that deep critical reflection about what they were doing, why they were there, and what they could do in that space. Also, I just think it's important to note that none of myself and the educators in the study we were all looking through a Western lens, through a non-Aboriginal lens. And I just want to make that as a point. But all of the educators sensed an alignment with sustainable practices and Aboriginal worldviews about connections and caring for land and being with the land. So they believed that their pedagogy was heavily influenced by caring for the land through Aboriginal perspectives. And that was something that came out very, very much importantly. They did also, I'm looking at the time, they did also change their pedagogies from talking with the children about nature to fostering a relationship with nature by shifting their focus to include the agency and the value of the bush. And this is what Sue was talking around when she introduced post-humanist theory. And so that what we call this is a common world approach. So we all belong together in and with nature. So it's not, they found that their pedagogies were changing, teaching about nature to teaching with nature and looking after nature and caring from it. They also found that their questioning techniques changed. Instead of asking, isn't that a lovely flower? What a pretty flower. Do you think that's a pretty flower? They started talking about nature in deep ways, and they were learning along with the children around that. One thing that they were aware of was, where did their thoughts and their beliefs and their philosophies about sustainable practices come from? Did it come from nature, being in nature, or did it emanate from their services where they were implementing sustainable practices within the centre? So there was a lot of deep reflection, a lot of deep discussion about that. They also felt that they were able to slow down in nature when they were there. There was not the interruptions of the routines of daily life in an early years setting. So they were able to slow down, they were able to be calm, they were able to engage with their senses more in nature and think more about sustainability, think more about caring for nature and the ethics of care. How much more time have I got?
Okay, I think that's about it. Was there one concluding statement you'd like to make, Fran?
The concluding statement that in one of the services, in terms of their pedagogical, they were moving from advocacy to activism about sustainability. So they were not only advocating for nature, they were being activists with nature. And that was a really strong thing that came out in the end. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Fran. That was really helpful and interesting. And certainly that activism for sustainability, for global sustainability, is an important thing that comes through all of the nature play programs, depending what the local context is and the community that's involved. We might hear a bit more of that from the Tasmanian group. So we'll move on now to Jenny Dudgeon and Ruth Whelan and you're going to be talking about community responses to a nature play, sustainability and outdoor classroom immersion program for the early years. Thanks, Jenny. And Ruth.
Over to Ruth. Okay, so the Sustainability Learning Centre is a purpose-built facility for all the schools in the state. In 2015, in partnership with the Aboriginal Education Services, we began a bush kindergarten for the community. So it's along the lines of maybe a playgroup program. So the parents or the family day carers, the grandparents stay with the children for the period of time that they're here, which is about an hour and a half each Monday. We have birth to 5-year-olds attending, and each week we have approximately 30 children plus their adults participating. There's myself and also Sharon Brett, who's an early years Aboriginal education worker, who the two of us, we take the group out bush, out onto country, and we explore and have morning tea out there, very much following the children. Many of them are regulars and in many ways show us which patch of the bush we need to use today. If there's been puddles, as it was last week, for the first time for the year, we had puddles and we had water in the drain. We didn't need to go very far at all. There was a lot of distraction, a lot of purpose, a lot of investigation as we headed off. Originally, the Bush Kinder program was 2 days a week, and that has morphed from 2 days a week for the community program to 1 day a week for the community program and 1 day a week for a schools program, which has become a professional learning opportunity for teachers, and that's the part that Jenny will talk about. The Bush Kinder program, we have families coming from up to 30 kilometres away to the centre. So some of those are people that have grown up in Tasmania. Some of them are those that I've grown up with in the bush, and then they're bringing their children. Some of them are the grandparents bringing the children, and then also the family day carers. We also have a number of families from elsewhere in the country moving to Tasmania and seeking out Bush Kinder. They're very passionate to find something that will help them to connect with their new place. And then similarly, we have quite a lot of families who have moved to Tasmania from overseas. At the moment, we have 6 different languages being spoken at Bush Kinder. We have Taiwanese and some Chinese, different dialects, but all communicating together, and also scaffolding one another with language and with introducing their children to the Tasmanian bush. We've got Japanese, Bosnian, Swedish, and then also the Tasmanian Indigenous language, Palawakani, being spoken. Each week, Sharon will welcome us to country, and she has a very strong through line each week of heritage and culture. That is all very seasonal, depending on what's happening out there in the bush. It's very much following the children, seeing where their interests are, providing them with provocations, questions, opportunities, but following their lead and letting them teach their parents, teach their adults, teach their carers. So there's balancing, climbing, splashing, gumboots turning into buckets, mud constructions going on, bricks, whatever else they discover out there. And very quickly it's an hour and a half down the track, and it's and a big cooey to bring them all back in together and head back. So because the centre's purpose-built, as the families come in through the door, the opportunities for conversations around energy use, water, the building design, how we sort waste, are all infusing into these community members, into the families, and it's being transferred that way through an infusing process, an inquisitive process for the adults as well as for the children. We're finding with the families that are coming through that it's important for them to be connecting to the country that they are on at the time. So even if they're passing through as visitors, as we had a grandmother visiting earlier in the year, she was bringing her grandson. She was finding it incredibly beneficial for herself as well as for her grandson, for her to know where she was and for her connection to this country, this patch of land where she is at the moment. And so similarly for those families that are here in Tasmania as visitors for 6, 12 months before they might head back to their overseas home, that connection to country is really important for them as well. And similarly for myself, for example, I've grown up in Tasmania, I've grown up on the mountain, and to be connecting to this country here, Mount Nelson, rather than Ferntree. So I've always been here, I'll always be here, but to again have a connection to country right here on this patch, rather than where I live currently. We have had challenges. So we've had times where we've had 60 children and their adults turn up, which is a big, overwhelming morning. And very much a question of, so where do we go today? How do we manage these numbers? What are we going to do if this continues? Those sorts of questions and reflections, are really becoming pressing as it becomes more and more popular and the word gets out there. Yeah.
Thanks, Ruth. Are you going to hand over to Jenny for a few minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks very much, Ruth. Hi, everybody. I'm Jenny, and we're at the Sustainability Learning Centre, as Ruth has said. It's a Department of Education facility, and I think what's wonderful is now the Department of Education, through a refocus on the early years, is very much focusing on play-based learning and encouraging teachers statewide to embrace playing outdoors and being outdoors with their children, and sticks and stones and rocks and leaves and all those sorts of things are tools and valid ways of learning. So I think we're really lucky to have that refocus project, which has assisted some of the groups that have come to us. But we've also been very much riding a crest of significant community interest, as Ruth alluded to, around nature play. So we've begun offering professional learning, and we've had Fran in Tasmania with Sam Crosby to offer a Bush Connections training program, which drew people from all around the state, from the childcare sector right through to our primary school sector and across all sectors, which was really well received. And through that level of interest, we've now created a Tasmanian Nature Play Network, which has embraced not just educators, but people who are working with local government, people who are working in the Environmental Protection Authority, people who are passionate educators like Chris, and just other people who have started to become interested in the environment and want to embrace and engage with that. So we're offering now opportunities to engage in national parks, along the Hobart Rivulet, activating spaces which have not been known to a lot of young families, particularly, new people. So it's trying to make people aware of what beautiful spaces there are here in Tasmania, more particularly in Hobart. So that's a benefit, I think, around making people aware of the environment so that they then can access it. And through our Early Childhood Educators Tasmania Network, which acronyms ECOT, we've been having a really strong nature play program for probably the last couple of years, and that's very much had a strong sustainability focus to that. And it's just growing really statewide. It's a really significant thing. So I think that's wonderful. And hopefully some of you may have seen the ABC TV news on the weekend. It featured Lansdowne Crescent, which began as, it's got a beautiful nature reserve just 10 minutes up the road. We've got a parent here tonight of a child that's participating in that program. And that's become a regular feature of that school, as that program highlighted. And they're ready to go out because they've got their puddle suits, they've got their gumboots, and, their dad's going, oh, I should have remembered it's mud play day today, that sort of thing. So it's an entrenched, but it's that love and awareness and growing appreciation, but then also looking at that space and wondering how they can sustain that. So it's that interplay of going out beyond the playground to the natural environment as well, which I think is really important. So we've been running a Train the Trainer gradual release model, which is an outdoor classroom immersion program, where we've been engaging with schools on four separate occasions across a 4-week period, where their children either come to us here, and we've got 65 hectares of beautiful dry sclerophyll forest, or we have some time here and some time at their space. And what's been wonderful about that is actually inviting teachers out. So they, like Balnarring, there's a beach and they've never been to the beach, and it's only 500 metres from their school. And it's activating spaces within even their manicured oval area and finding places that they can engage with and also observe their children and notice a whole range of behaviours that they haven't noticed before. And I think that's a beautiful opportunity for the teachers, because anyway, we're providing provocation, but the teachers can observe, which is really, really, really great. And that strong Indigenous partnership that we have with Aboriginal education, which really focuses on the cross-curriculum priorities of sustainability, because it's being on the land, learning on the land. And we've had children here, and there was a child who fell over, and she immediately went to the pig face and took a little piece of pig face and rubbed it on the other child's cut, because that's a natural antiseptic. And, that was beautiful. And we had some other children here and they were describing, well, these are bush foods, this sort of thing. So it's understanding and then relating that information to other children, I think is beautiful. But it's also addressing the general capabilities of critical and creative thinking, and its literacy, its numeracy. So I think the pushback's been, this is another thing, but I think we've got to really look at it. This is a holistic way of children learning and leading their own learning, that they're capable. And it's through taking those risks and exploring, seeing that wonder and having some fun, that they then develop and appreciate an understanding of the environment. And I think it's also, the quality.
You're getting waved at.
Yeah, right, okay, yeah, well it is. So we've had about 2,300 visits last year for people who are really wanting to engage with nature play. So that's a significant investment, and very much around that play-based inquiry and going back from the children. And we've had children make comments like, I've been dreaming about this place. So, that's really showing how they're internalising it. And we've got this quite incredible concrete structure that's incredibly ugly, but this group of children created it into an opera, and this was the theatre, and they revisited this space every week and conducted the opera, and everybody had their beautiful, they each had their roles, but then they were treating it beautifully. They would leave it and then they would reset it for the next group to come in. So it's just, and then the next week it could be a rocket ship, or it could be, just a whole range of things. So it's that creativity and appreciation of something that's a man-made structure, but then it's also those kids who go out into the bush and they look at you to say, you're joking, this isn't a playground, where are the things? And it's that ability to then have that slow looking and really, take time to then see what those natural affordances are and how they can make and use those, which I think is really important. So we're really looking at becoming eco-literate. So it's really reading the bush and really taking and understanding about the seasons. We found a dead possum the other day, and that created a whole range of questions about how that happened, what will happen to it and all that type of thing. It's also the economic imperative for a lot of families to realise that the bush and the beach are accessible.
Really?
Stop. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm sorry, but you have two other people sitting next to you.
I'm sorry.
Cross with me.
Okay.
I don't cut you off.
That's all right.
So there are a lot of interesting points raised there. Can I just remind people, if you have particular questions, to put them on the group chat, and Jennifer can facilitate some conversation. We have about half an hour to go. So we have Chris Hass next to talk about the Master's Research Study. So thank you, Chris.
Oh, thanks, Sue. Just a bit of context about my practice. I'm a kindergarten teacher in a Department of Education primary school on a hilly slope of Hobart. And in Tasmania, kindergarten is the first official year of schooling. Kinder children are turning 5, and they come for 3 days a week. I run a bush kinder for half a day every week with my kinders. So for my whole teaching career, from my first job in Outback Australia as a secondary teacher, I've been taking children outside. I've been enjoying the outdoors with the children and recognising their right to learn in the outdoors, right through to now as a kinder teacher. It always seemed the logical thing to do and the sensible thing to do. But I was gradually noticing that decrease in connection to nature that I think a lot of us noticed, and I was just really curious to dig deeper into that. And so I started my master's research about kindergarten children's introduction to sustainability through transformative play in nature. And I found out that researchers really did perceive a causal link between the increased screen time and busy family life and the decreasing health of the population and the environment. So I was finding out about all those theories that really informed my eco-pedagogy that I'd been using for most of my life, and the things that Sue talked about, like systems theory and critical theory and Indigenous perspectives. The peace curriculum was also important to my practice, and I was really interested also in Anne Pello's work on creating a connection to nature through an identity, like an ecological identity. Yep. So I was testing all these ideas out through those years of my master's, and though it finished in 2013, I continue to be an informal researcher in my practice with all my kids. Yeah, that's just a snapshot of the background of my practice, but I'm going to talk a little bit about just a project from last year that really emphasises children's passion for place. Once they make a connection, they're willing to speak out, and I was really interested in giving them that civic voice to defend their play space. So this active citizenship project that I'm going to talk about started last year. So each year I take my class out into this beautiful place called Providence Valley. It's the perfect outdoor play space. Not that you have to have a perfect outdoor play space to do nature play, but I was really fortunate. And it's got multiple natural elements, steep slopes, a creek running through it, even caves up in the cliffs on the side. And it's just got endless play potential. And the kids, of course, develop a strong relationship. They'd planted many footsteps in that place, and when a big storm came through Hobart and closed down a lot of areas, including Providence Valley, at the end of May, we had to start searching around for somewhere else to go outdoors. We waited till about June, and the other areas weren't as engaging. Providence Valley is where the children had made connection, and there was no work going ahead in Providence Valley, so I started writing with the parents to people that might have been responsible for the wash, for the flood damage. And I just got lots of answers about it being not a priority. There were a lot of other areas that needed fixing up, and it could take to the end of the year till our track was fixed and we could go back in. And when I told the kids this, of course, they were bitterly disappointed because they were busting to get back out there, and they were saying, why is it taking so long? And so because that passion was clearly obvious, I decided that, they're participating citizens in the present. They should really voice these concerns. So I offered them the chance to communicate with somebody that could really make a difference. We went straight to the top and started writing letters to the Lord Mayor of Hobart. Nobody else was responding, but the kids were thinking that they might have a voice. So we spent quite a long time discussing and deciding why they care so much about Providence Valley. What was what was really the passion for them in Bush Kinder? And they came up as a class with as many reasons as they could. And they realised they'd have to be persuasive. Obviously, I hadn't been persuasive enough, so they sort of brought out all their persuasive skills. So, for example, Noah had an infallible plan. He said, I'm going to draw the Lord government. Well, they were getting their terms a bit mixed up, but I'm going to draw the Lord government and fixing the track, and I'm going to have love hearts coming out of the sky like rain. So, you know, they just totally worked out how to sway people. They all did different amazing drawings, and we scribed their messages. And if you could see Noah's drawing here, I don't think you can see it, but I'll hold it up anyway. It is indeed persuasive. You can see the love hearts coming out of the sky. And his message, well, he said, my drawing shows that you are fixing the path and that we love you. So a little bit of love in a Lord Mayor's office certainly doesn't go astray. I've got lots of drawings that they were doing. I'll just read a couple. This whole project absorbed my class for over 3 months, but this is just the beginning bit. We need to fix Providence Valley Reserve because it's important to us. Can you fix it soon, please? And another letter said, Dear Government, could you please open up Providence Valley really, 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 really soon? We learn to look after the trees there. We learn about the bugs there, to look after them. So even qualifying that they're not just observing, but they're connecting. Somebody else said, please fix the crack in the path because we really want it fixed so we can see the beautiful trees again. And another one said, we make homes for the bugs in Providence Valley. We use sticks and leaves and stones. We do it with our friends. So even showing the social connection and the social construction of knowledge there. And one last example, I love it because of the fossils and it's really special there. I love playing in nature. And hold this one up. This little person he did not want to have any, he did not want to have ever do paper and pencil activities, but here you can actually see for the first time he's done his own writing. So excellent. Okay. All right. So they straight away, next week we got a letter back from the Lord Mayor and the work was going ahead in 1 week, and the track was opened, and the children then did a big project about celebrating the opening, and they invited all the families and the track workers and the Lord Mayor and the whole community, and it was a really big celebration that they could finally have their rights to be playing in nature again.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Chris. That's a really good example of active citizenship. We might move on quickly now to Michael, who's sitting near you, Tasmania. Thank you for your patience, Michael, and I'm looking forward to hearing your contribution today.
No worries, thanks, Sue. I'll be nice and quick. I'm conscious of time. But firstly, I just wanted to echo that I did go to Karen's ECOLN training, and anyone that gets an opportunity, it was really, really fantastic. So little plug for them. That was really, really good. So thank you, Karen. It is good to see you again. A little bit further away this time, but anyway. So, no worries. So I'm talking about sort of our context of balancing a growing school and our environmental stewardship. So to give a snapshot, I'm a kindergarten teacher at a school called Eastside Lutheran College. Started as a really small school, and our number of students has tripled in the last 5 years. So we're a really large growing school. We currently have 297 students, and we're kinder to year 10. And where we're situated, there's around 7.5 hectares of bushland. We're really close to the main range, which is a protected area, but we're also adjacent to a highway, so quite urban as well. As a result of that, there are parts of our property that have significant value ecologically, and so that sort of was a consideration in establishing our program. My class are 4 to 5-year-old kinders. We actually do 4 full days a week, and we have 1 full day outside a week, and that started in week 1. So we have a full day dedicated to nature play, and yeah, that's what we do. Since coming on board, we've had a bit of a shift of mindset. I think a lot of other teachers saw our kids so engaged outside and saw the benefits of our kids going outside, and so what started as my kinder class playing outside rapidly became me taking foundation, year 1, year 2, year 3 and year 4 students outside. So on my planning day, I volunteered my time because those teachers didn't feel comfortable initially, but now they've taken off. But with that, a site that was selected to cope with 16 children once a week rapidly became a site that was seeing 70 plus children over a week. And so we really had to rethink our plans. So as a result of that, and it's still an ongoing conversation, but it meant that we had to involve a lot of stakeholders. So we've got a school board, we've got our school leadership, all the other teachers that are involved, our groundskeepers and others, and we had to look at what we were doing and what we could do better to maintain those sites. So as a result of that, Kinder now have rotating sites, and we now have ongoing consultation about our sites and what damage or impact we're having on those sites and whether we need to relocate. And what we can do to improve those sites as well is an important one. The children have been a really powerful voice in that as well, sort of empowering them to open the discussion of whether we're having an impact on place. I suppose the other interesting thing about our site is it used to be a drive-in movie theatre, and it also became a dumping ground for a little period of time. So there's been lots of opportunities for the kids to, you know, find things that shouldn't be there and what we can do to improve the space. So now that our children have been doing this for a period of time, they've developed an attachment to that space, and now they're taking their own steps to preserve and protect it, which has been really powerful. I won't read through it, but through taking other groups, our prep cohort, through their own initiative, I had nothing to do with it, but it was really lovely. I found this in my classroom. They wrote a book called Protecting Our Special Place. And they wrote that for my kindergarten students, and that was sort of the messages that they wanted to give us. And some of it is really beautiful. Just some of the quotes are things as simple as don't squish the bugs, it's their home too, and don't break the branches of the trees because they'll die. If you do accidentally break one, put mud on it to help make a bush band-aid. It helps it to grow back and the tree won't get sick. So there's lots of different pages in there, but I just wanted to give that perspective of how to balance sort of a growing school and greater interest in nature play. So that's sort of our context. It's still changing, but I thought that was an interesting aspect. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. It's great to have such a diversity of contributions, and I hope everybody that's been listening has become more aware of the nature play movement across Australia. And you know, there's so many different things that have been shared, whether it was the language provocations in cultural diversity in Tasmania, Indigenous meetings and the publication work that Karen's been doing, pedagogies from Karen. There's just so many different aspects. Another thing that sort of stood out to me too was also the connections with people beyond the usual spheres that we deal with in early childhood services and schools. So as practitioners, we're making links with different sorts of people in our communities and in governments so that they become more aware of early childhood and early years education and the benefits of play-based approaches. I just want to acknowledge that at the moment we don't seem to have any questions on the chat side. There have been a few questions around access to websites and Facebook, etc., but there don't seem to be any other questions at the moment. So I think what I might do is, Jennifer Pearson was keen to mention if anyone's from the West, then she's involved in a group in the West that might be of interest to people. And I'll mention something about the upcoming Alliance work that's happening in Education for Sustainability. And then I'll perhaps throw it open to any panel members who wanted to raise anything else that you haven't had an opportunity to do so. So Jennifer, would you like to say something about the what's going on in the West?
Yeah, thanks, Sue. I was mindful in the beginning of time, so I didn't.
Yeah.
But in WA, for the last 10 years, we've been crafting the Little Green Steps WA model, and it came out of Wygong Gosford, the concept did. But here in WA, we recognise that having one single local government replicate that was hard. So we go to local governments and offer them for 1 day a week. Can they contract us to align with their services? The City of Coburn, Canning and Armidale have found us quite useful to be partners to. So we have contracts with them for 1 day a week, and it's really leveraged a lot of interest and a lot of support for early years sectors in those local councils. We also do workshops. Out of that work came the Sustainability in Action book, because Sally Snedden was one of our program managers, and Pettit is a committee member. So I was supposed to be on the writing panel, but got unwell and had to withdraw. So we're doing what we can to add value to this area, which is critically important. And it was just in recognition that nobody here was going to put resources into early years sector for programs around environmental education. And it's not to say that people weren't doing really good work, but what we're doing is developing directories and aligning our work with Indigenous educators in the area. So over time, it's like the rest of you, you can craft some really useful and meaningful engagement for everybody. But the other thing I would like to mention is, on a national level, what is it that we can do as a national group to support all of you? And we've just had a survey go out as special interest groups, and we've had an early childhood special interest group before, and we're really happy to try to help support that if that's what this group would like to do. If anyone is in WA or anyone would like to hear more about the model, it hopefully can be replicated in other states and territories. We're really happy to share how we do it. It may not suit you, it may, but it's a good start, and you can bounce off what we're doing. And we've hopefully built some credibility with government departments and providers that shows that, with committed volunteers, which we all are, you can make a big difference.
Yeah.
So thank you for letting me.
Thanks, Jennifer. I know that we've had mention of the state-based nature play networks, the one that Karen is convening in Victoria and Fran in New South Wales, and also the network that Jenny has established in Tasmania. Alongside these networks, there are also the long-standing Education for Sustainability networks that have been happening around Australia, first beginning in 1992. So, as you appreciate, there's a lot of overlap between Education for Sustainability and nature play. So the sustainability networks have formed a loose alliance across Australia. So if you're focusing on sustainability, they're worth getting in touch with. And Jenny Judgeon and I are working together to develop a forum which will be held prior to the Early Childhood Australia Conference in Hobart in September this year. So Jenny and I can provide more information about that if you happen to be going to Hobart for the ECA conference this year. So can I also ask the panel members, was there anything else that panel members would like to contribute to the discussion today? Yes, Fran, thank you. Put your hand up first.
Yes, I know, sorry. If anybody is in the New England area, we are organising Sue and myself.
Yep. Thanks for the reminder, Fran.
Yeah. And Sue Motley from the Armidale Community Preschool and Matt Mackenzie from the Environmental Centre. We're organising a nature play conference on the 6th and the 7th of September. So I think I've already put that onto the Facebook site, but I'll have to check.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been busily linking the national Facebook site to all the sites that have been put on the site here. So.
Lovely.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Karen, did you have anything further you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I'll see you in Tasmania.
Tasmania. Okay. And people in Tasmania, what would you like to add?
Go for it. The mic's on.
We just had a question, Sue. Just wondering how much Australian research there is that tests the concept that connected children become strong advocates for sustainability, Australian research, and even the colliery, you know, that what sort of early childhood experiences did those that are climate deniers and leaders in destructive corporations or whatever, policy making, what sort of early childhood experiences did they have? Have we got any hard research on that?
Look, as Fran would attest doing her PhD, there's a big gap in nature play research in Australia generally. The research, a lot came out of the UK in the last 20 years or so with the forest school and forest preschool. And a lot of that focused very much on the benefits for children and the risk management and those sorts of things. What's happening now is that there seems to be a lot more interest in developing a research base in Australia around nature play. But I think I could still count on one hand the number of projects that are going on in this area. I've had quite a few queries from people wanting to do research. So it is certainly growing, but we do need lots more. I think also what you're alluding to there is that connection between childhood and adulthood that goes back to some of the seminal work that Louise Chawler did around the significant life experiences that lead people to be engaged in environmental activism in their adult years. So if you go back to Louise Chawler's work and also Tanner, anyone else across the literature can suggest anything else, but that would be where you'd go for those connections.
Nothing Australian though.
No, Australia has certainly been very proactive around education for sustainability research. So that area is really strong in Australia, New Zealand and Scandinavia. I'd say that we're world leaders in education for sustainability research. But when you look at the nature play research, that is only just emerging at the moment.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So would it, you'd be aware of the Australian Journal for Environmental Education?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, there are elements that run through that, but it's not strong, is it?
No, it's not strong, and we're in a situation where for all the years that I've been involved, we have one foot in environmental ed and education for sustainability literature, and we have one foot in the early childhood literature, and where research and papers are published can be in either or both. So you have to keep looking around to find where this material might be published. Yeah.
We also had another question, and that's about training. Whether, you know, it's really terrific and it really is wonderful because it empowers a whole range of people, and it's great to set up networks and use that. But is it really necessary, or or can it become a barrier, do you think, in going into the future?
I'm sorry, Jenny, I missed the first part of your question.
Right, so, like we've undertaken training, each of us, and we've really enjoyed it, but it's been really beneficial. But it's partly because I was feeling a little bit that I needed some guidance about it. But is it necessary, or could it become a barrier? You know, is accreditation required, I suppose?
Yeah. Yes, I know Fran would like to say something, and can I just say if you look at the UK and the Canadian models around forest preschool, they make it quite clear that training is absolutely essential, but that's not the case in Australia. We have a very different context. Karen has written about that in her article that she mentioned earlier. Fran, what would you like to add to it?
I would say that training is not essential, but for participants or educators who are taking children outside the centre, there is always something to learn. And I think it's very important for educators to think why they're doing it. What is the purpose of why they're taking it out? And I think that critical reflection and gaining knowledge about how to find a site and how to approach an owner about a site instead of just going to somewhere and using someone's land without getting any benefit from the owner of that land who knows something about it. So I think Karen, you probably agree, there's a lot to learn about training, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. And I wouldn't personally like to see it a regulated thing in Australia.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we had a big conversation about having a accredited course or just the training. And I think we just want to show teachers they already have that when they've done their training at universities, and ideally that it becomes part of the university courses to see that it is part of what they're already doing. And the danger of accredited course is that then there's one way of doing it, and we're trying to say there's not one way, there are multiple ways. And so then to put it back on the people that are participating to say, well, why do you want to do it and what's your philosophy? And that could be very different across Australia. And I think it's really important for us in an Australian context to keep that individualisation about the programs.
Thanks, Karen. I think that was one of the things that I was sort of trying to convey in the overview at the start, that there's no one right way to do it. There are many different contexts, many different communities, and people need to be critically reflective about how they engage in particular spaces with their communities and develop a program that's going to suit them. I think the training, if people feel they need it and if it's empowering for people, that's fine. But I certainly don't want to go down the track of you must have a certificate XYZ in forest preschool to be able to go out. And that's what's happened overseas. And I think it can be a barrier, and it promotes that rather than being heterogeneous, it's a more homogeneous sort of approach to running programs. And we've seen that from some of the training that has come from overseas, where this is the recipe and this is how you do it. And I don't think we need that in Australia.
And not just in the nature play space, Reggio Emilia, that happened with that. You can't do Reggio here because it's not Reggio. So we want to avoid that happening with our nature programs.
Yeah, it's a good analogy, Karen. Very useful one, because people have all been there and done that and heard about Reggio. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, just having a bank of all these wonderful ideas that have been spoken about today, that would educate people and really empower them.
I'd like to hear some questions from the participants, whether they felt anything was useful or was it provocative. What was it? What impacts it had on people?
Sandra? Was it great? Oh, we're getting some nods.
You've got your private audience, haven't you? In Tasmania.
They're giving us the thumbs up.
Maybe they could unmute if they've got a question now.
Okay. Well, we do have someone that, Lisa, thank you for saying that you were busy listening and taking a lot of notes and loved it. So thank you. So, all right. So I think we probably need to wind it up here. It's very close to 6 o'clock. I'd like to express my appreciation to the people who've facilitated and shared their experiences, both practical and research experiences. We've covered a wide range of things in this learning circle today. Thank you to the participants for being there, for sitting there and listening for an hour and a half. I'll just remind you that it will be available, the recording will be available for the next week, and I have all the email addresses, so I will be emailing the link so that people can access this recording. You can listen to it many times over if you wish. Jennifer, was there anything else from an A²E² perspective?
No, just thank you, and we'll post this up on Facebook and on our website. And you point people towards that, and we'll make it available for the next week at least.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And we might need to think about doing something further, given that we had over 500 people that wanted to be involved in this Zoom session. We need to do something further within the association to keep this conversation going for people, I think. Okay.
Yeah, and you know, if you've got any ideas, line them up, and we'll see what capacity we have to get them to work for you.
Yeah. Okay.
We're all volunteers and we're all mad, so it helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. It's time to close shop and time for a drink of whatever you have at this time of day. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Well done, Jenny.
Well done.
Well done, Jenny, organising it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity, Sue.
Oh, I think Sue's jumped ship. So
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, it's always fabulous listening to all these stories.
Take care.
You too.
Okay, bye from Tasmania. See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Presentation.
Bye.
Take care.
Wish I could get down there, but it's a long way to come from WA.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
No, look, we'll have to set up a Zoom for that conference that you're having. We could set up a Zoom